All right, everyone, welcome back to the show. I'm here with Danny Johnson, and I'm looking forward to getting into his journey as a real estate entrepreneur and also talking with him about a new project that he has been working on for a while now that is called a Forefront CRM. That's pretty cool, which we'll cover later on in the show. And Danny, I'm really excited to connect with you one-on-one. We've had one conversation before, and I know we know a lot of the same people, but we've actually never connected one-on-one. So I'm looking forward to doing this again, man. We know a lot of the same folks.
Yeah, me too, Greg. Yeah, thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely. So if people are not familiar with you, if you can just kind of give everyone a little bit about your background and how you got to where you're at, and then we'll dive into your business and go from there.
Yeah, let's do it. So I started back in about 2003. So I've been in real estate for quite a while. I didn't start that way though. I was a software developer right out of college. And my dad actually started flipping houses. Excuse me. And, just the change in his life that happened from when he, growing up, he was an entrepreneur, always trying different businesses. None of them really did very well. But then all of a sudden with the real estate, it took off for him. And just, it was so cool to see him so thrilled for life and just talking about like his adventures. I mean, it was really, when he would talk about it, was like he was telling me about adventures that he was having, so it was cool. It's like, well, you're having a lot more fun than I am, because I'm sitting in this office and I'm just like doing stuff that's not challenging me or anything. And I'm just getting this bug and I'm seeing his excitement. I'm like, man, I don't know, but I'm kind of interested in maybe trying that stuff out too.
That's awesome,
right?
Man.
Yeah. And so he, he had me read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. So of course that fired me up even more, just like most real estate investors. Right. And I started looking for a house to buy myself. I figured, well, I can just dip my toes in by I'm looking to buy a house anyway. So I'll try to find something that needs work. And I was looking at HUD houses, like HUD Home Store or whatever it was. I forgot what the website was back then, but I had the benefit of being a homeowner if I bought the house. So some of the houses I would have dibs for like 10 days to be able to make an offer before investors could, which was awesome. And, but I got disappointed really quickly because I wanted a certain kind of house in a certain area. And I found out, I can't be so strict and have so many rules for this, because I was frustrated. It took me like 9 months, I think, to find that first deal, even to move in, even with the ability to offer before investors. And I was starting to get disheartened. My dad actually was doing deals in smaller towns outside of San Antonio, and I was in San Antonio. And I was starting to think, well, he can do it. Maybe he's possible to do and find great deals out where he is, but in San Antonio, it's too competitive. Just having those doubts, but found that first deal, lived in that for 3 years, fixed it up, did some of the work myself, and found out that was a big waste of my time. And not, after several times of getting bloody knuckles and stuff, I was like, why am I doing this? So I learned not to do that stuff, but sold that house. I think it made like 40 something thousand. And being that I was in it for, 2 out of the 5 years or whatever, I didn't have to pay any capital gains. So it was awesome. So I took that, and but that was, I started doing more after that first one. I started looking to get the second one, and that's when I made a transition into doing marketing directly to homeowners, like people that might be wanting to sell, motivated sellers. And that just changed everything. And I can fast forward the conversation and just say, basically, over a bunch of trial and error and dialing stuff in, ended up doing roughly, close to about 1,000 deals over the last like 20 years.
That's awesome, man. Especially you're in San Antonio, and that's a pretty competitive area from what I'm told,
right,
from some mutual friends. I mean, you got Dallas, San Antonio, Austin is bananas. And, you're able to stand out, and obviously a tough market, and you got a lot of experience under your belt. So another thing as I've prepared for this interview, you're very, you got the computer background. So I know a lot of the leads that you have been generating in your career have been more inbound leads versus leads that are, like outbound, such as texting and calling. So, I mean, what, besides your background, like what did you do to start when in the beginning to where you had a consistent like stream of these inbound leads? Like what channels did you really try to master? And maybe the listeners can take some of this and they can implement it in their own businesses.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great question. To get the traction going in the beginning, it was a lot of like guerrilla marketing kind of tactics. I think there was even a book called Guerrilla Marketing that I read. And some of that stuff was pretty crazy. It's like I I worked a deal with a local pizza joint to print out some coupons or something, and I would have my We Buy Houses ad on the bottom half of it, and there are like coupons on the top half of it. It's kind of weird that they even accepted to me to do that, but pizzas were being delivered. But I was close to downtown at that time, living close to downtown, so it's mostly tourists in San Antonio downtown then, and so people were ordering pizzas, but they didn't even live here and have houses to sell. And so the only thing I was getting was prank calls, like people, and I don't even know if they were maybe even prank. They were just trying to order pizza, like calling my phone. So I didn't get any real good deals. But doing the guerrilla marketing stuff, getting out there, doing bandit signs. Obviously, you got to watch out for legal ramifications of that kind of thing in most places. Doing a lot of bandit signs, doing a lot of driving for dollars. That was just like the bread and butter. And to get traction, obviously, it was like feast or famine sometimes. But
yeah,
really got to know the different little areas of San Antonio, the sweet spots, the places where there's a lot of people, motivated sellers, but also a great retail market, and just those things where we knew we could pick it up and then find someone that would want to buy it, or fix it up and then sell it to a homeowner because it was, in the right price point. So learning all of that, doing driving for dollars, that was really the bulk of what we were doing in the beginning. And then I started thinking, okay, well, if I can get some, people are searching for, people to handle a house situation and looking for somebody online. Then it wasn't so common for people to know that people are flipping houses, right? Because that was even back in the beginning when those shows even came out.
yeah.
So they were starting to get some knowledge of it, but people weren't real familiar with the fact that there were so many people doing that. Regular homeowners didn't know so much. So they were searching for things online, not We Buy Houses, or, maybe even then because they saw the bandit signs and they would search for We Buy Houses. But mostly it was, how to sell my house fast or something like that. And so to have that website there would be a great way to do that because they already knew they had a problem that they wanted to take care of. They were already proved to be at that point, right?
Yeah.
And so having somebody like that looking for you and then finding you is a completely different scenario, right? Than mass direct mail. And people are like, what is this? Like, what, this guy.
How do you know I want to sell? I mean, we get probably 10 calls a day. I mean, we do a lot of outbound. We do inbound too, but you get a lot of people who don't even know what's going on. And they're calling to kick tires versus online. They're already, they're looking to sell or else they wouldn't have called you,
Right. And then you find the paranoid people. I don't know if it was with you that I was telling this about this story, but my website, I noticed that I was getting a lot of traffic from a guitar forum, a bass guitar forum. And I was like, why is everybody coming to my website from this bass guitar forum? So I went over to it and I searched for my website on there, and a guy had received a letter from me. And he, instead of calling me and asking what it was about, he got on this bass guitar forum with all his buddies and was like, is this a scam? This guy's trying to rip me off or something? Why is he wanting to buy my house and all these things? And all these guys are all these assumptions and stuff. And after about 3 pages, I think it was, like, one of the bass guitarists was a real estate investor. He's like, no, this is common. This is just, mass mail out to find people that might be interested in selling. So, but they were conjuring up all this stuff saying that they Googled me and, I was a real estate attorney or an attorney or something and all this other stuff. And it's like, none of this stuff is true. And it was just, all he had to do was pick up the phone and call me and ask what was up, like why I was mailing to him and all that kind of stuff. So it's funny how people will get those messages if they're not ready for that kind of thing. But the opposite side of that is somebody that gets online that's like, hey, I want to get this house sold. Yeah. And I'm ready to do it right away, whatever it takes. And I don't know how to sell it because the place is a dump. And I don't think an agent is going to want to list this or anybody's even going to want to be able to buy it. And having that conversation where they say, tell you things like, you're an angel and, God sent and everything because you're helping me out. It's just a much better place to be.
Yes. Oh man, that's so true. Yeah. We get SEO leads and I'll never forget. You're going to like this story. You might have never heard anything like this. Actually, you probably have because you've gotten thousands of leads. I had a lady one time, I kid you not. I never met her. I'm in California. This house is in New York. She reaches out online. She's obviously got a dump to sell. I buy this house She sends me a selfie when we're done with the deal with her and her pet pig and said, I guess got to let you know, I know you've never seen me before, but I'm so happy you bought my house. I figured you'd like, to see my pet pig. It's my best friend. And
Yeah.
she was like a cheerleader for me, and I never met her. But the dynamic of that is like, she reached out to me. She knew she was getting into a deal where probably she didn't want to list it with an agent. And she was ecstatic, and she left a review and this, that, and the other. And you're just going to get that more with the inbound marketing, whether that's SEO or Google or even Facebook. I mean, anywhere where they're, like where they're going to your site and then either opting in or they're calling. I mean, we have a few in the pipeline now where you didn't have to sell that hard because they already sold themselves by going to my website.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, so you can get the conversion rate up quite a bit, the number of leads you're having to sift through and go on appointments for and all that, because you've got much more motivated people. And the thing, it kind of builds on itself over time. And that's the thing with this. It's like one of those strategies, as most of them are, where the people that find success are the people that stick with it for a number of years, because it's what it takes, right? And but the way it builds on itself is you have those people that give you those reviews, and you should be asking for them all the time.
Oh yeah.
No matter which form of marketing or deals that you're doing, to get those online reviews, because what happens when people even get direct mail these days?
They look you up.
Yeah, they search for you. Even if you put a website on there, they might not necessarily go to that direct website. They might do a search, and you've got to have these reviews, because that's how they're going to measure maybe who they talk to. If they get on there and see that one of your competitors has 80 5-star reviews and you've got 0 or 1, you kind of already have a disadvantage, right? You're already kind of, in their minds might be a little bit more suspect. My daughter's always talking about how everything is sus or whatever, but
suspect,
sus, because anyway, they're video games and stuff. But yeah, so that kind of builds, and I think this day and age, you just have to have that. But getting back into the conversion rate part of it, because that's something that really transformed my business over the years, and even more so than the whole inbound lead thing. I think the bigger transition though, and the bigger change in my business that made such a difference for us, to one, do more deals consistently, but two, to give us freedom. Because that's what we set out to do in the business. And, we were just, my ex-wife and I were working our butts off all the time because we were doing everything, wearing all the hats.
Yeah.
And, basically it was set up like this. We did 25 deals last year. We want to do 40 this next year, something like that, like early on, right? So how do we do that? Well, we need to do more marketing. We need to get more leads in. And that's honestly, that's the way it kind of went for a long time. And it's like, I need to learn this other marketing tactic or get smart and creative and come up with another one or tweak our letters in our series. I paid like $250 for some huge out of print, like direct mail marketing book, and read that thing for a number of months and like wrote these really weird marketing pieces, after all of that. And I look at them now, I'm like, what was I thinking? But it was just like trying to find that edge. And that's kind of what I was wasting a bunch of time doing, because I wasn't really dialing in anything, right? I was just kind of throwing mud out and hoping some would stick. And I would keep doing it and keep having to shovel more mud and throw it out there and keep doing that kind of stuff, because my equation was leads, and then a certain percentage of those leads became deals. But I never thought, hey, maybe I can tweak that conversion rate of the number of leads I'm getting into deals.
Yeah.
Right. What would make that difference? I was just operating the way I always had. I had, at that point, maybe I was, 8 years in or something, 8 or 9 years in. And I had a lot of experience, but, and people have probably heard this many times before, but it's that thing where you're saying, well, I've got 8 or 9 years experience, and no, you don't. You really have 1 or 2 years experience repeated that many years.
Yeah.
Because you just kept doing the same thing.
Totally.
And that's really how we ended up, like we were doing more deals every year, but we were working more, and we were trying more and spending more on marketing and all that kind of stuff, and having to go to more appointments. And, it was just like a drain. It was exhausting. And, it was that pivotal point where, we got to start looking at bringing on some help, number one. But number two, like looking at what's happening when leads are coming in to get more of these things turned into deals, because the whole, if it's not a deal and then moving on to the next one, or like a super motivated seller or some easy
A lay down. I call that like the unicorn seller that's going to like jump off their cliff or sell their house. Like that doesn't, especially in San Diego where I live, where I do some deals. I mean, these people are smart, sophisticated. Their houses are $1 million. Even in New York, it's the same thing. These people are really savvy and it's expensive. So you're not going to get these unicorn sellers that often,
Yeah. And I, back then I wrote a book called Flipping Houses Exposed, and I documented.
I've read that book, by the way. I've read it.
Yeah. 34,
yeah,
it's on Amazon if anybody wants it, but it's 34 weeks in my business. And I was ramping back up at that point because I'd taken time off to take flying lessons and pretend like I was retired. But, my business slowed down and I needed to pick it back up, and I wanted accountability. So I started posting about everything I was doing in my business, all the marketing I was doing, every single call I was getting from a seller, and documenting all of it, saying this person called, they want this much, the house is worth this much, here's why they're selling, here's whether I went to look at it, what I offered, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And over those 34 weeks, I documented, and that's all in that book, I documented, I think 495 leads. 495 motivated seller leads where somebody actually called me and said, hey, I would like to get an offer on my house. I did 11 or 13, I think, deals out of all of those leads. That is horrible. And you'll see it when you read the book. Like if you'll see, because I'll say next, like, because it wasn't a unicorn right off the bat. It wasn't I need to sell this thing yesterday and I'll take
whatever offer you give, and I'm not going to shop your offer. I mean, I have scenarios where like I'll get, especially in San Diego, we got 17 offers we're getting on this property. What's your offer? And I feel like I'm back at the courthouse steps, bidding on auctions.
Yeah. So nowadays, even more so, right? Like it's so much more important to not be just killing yourself trying to generate 1,000 leads, like really focus in, especially for newer people, because you're not even getting that many leads to begin with. You have to hone your craft. You've got to build and treat it like a business. I think that's probably what sums up what I'm talking about here with the transition and how I was operating my business. We were really basically operating it more like a hobby for those 8 or 9 years. And we didn't want to, it's not that we even didn't want to. I think it's more so that we didn't have the time, or we didn't make the time to start tracking numbers as close as we should have, right? And taking a look at what's happening with all of these. How many leads do we get from this campaign? How many of those became appointments? How many of those became contracts and then closed? Really looking at that and following that week over week. I think we had some starts where we would start doing that, but then we get busy, and after 2 or 3 weeks, it would just go out the window.
Yeah.
Like that call to go look at that house became more important than looking at the numbers again. And so it's like getting those weekly meetings, even though it was my ex-wife and I, like Monday mornings, those weekly meetings, like forcing ourselves to have that time to really start looking at things and just treating the business like a true business. And then saying, okay, well, we got all these leads. We only got, this many appointments. Why is that? Like, are we weeding out too many? Are we doing something or making assumptions? And just starting to look at those things and tweak those and trying to get those other pieces dialed in better, which included sales training, which included all kinds of different things. Don't assume that just going to the house and being a nice person with the seller is going to do the deal, right? There's some things that need to be learned. And then finding out that I was having a hard time doing all of that because I'm only one person. And, I think there was a moment where, I was taking a call from a seller while we were driving. And after I got off the phone, my ex told me, she goes, do you realize how rude you sounded? I was like, oh man, I didn't even think about it. Like I didn't want to take the call, and it must have shown, right? I was just annoyed. I was like, oh, I don't want to take this call right now. I just want to,
I've been there so many times, man. That's why I just hired a property buying specialist for that reason. I can relate, dude. Yeah.
So start looking at where that's going to be possible. And then, finding a way to work that out. And that doesn't have to, I think some of us get stuck in thinking, well, we got to make enough money or get enough consistency to pay somebody really good money full-time out of the gate. And that's not necessarily true. We can find people that can work for us part-time and ease into it and figure out how that goes. Because you're probably going to make mistakes if you never hired before anyway, like I did, make huge mistakes and find out that you really do need to document all that stuff that we have in our heads that we think other people are just going to pick
right.
up
It's like
on.
intuitive, like, oh yeah, just do this, go on Redfin and make like, they're like, what are you talking about? Like I'm speaking Urdu to them and they don't even know what's going on. And I found too, like, I actually started, I mean, this still happens to this day. I mean, I have someone who talks to sellers and makes offers for me. I have an admin, all this, but like, I made a rule up like 2 weeks ago. I was telling Caroline, I said, for now on, if I'm in a bad mood, I'm not getting on the telephone with anybody. You know why? Because I'm going to be a dick. I'm from New York. I'm very aggressive and I'm going to blow an opportunity. So my new rule is, even as we're doing this podcast, my phone is in the other room. When we're done with this, I'm not even going to look at it. Cause like I these podcasts, I put my everything into them. So I'm really focused. So I need to buffer 15 or 20 minutes after. So when I get on the phone, my head is on straight and I can call some people back if I need to and have a good conversation. But it comes down to, I remember I was reading a book called Clockwork, really good book. And the author was talking about like the idea that we feel as entrepreneurs, especially if we're solopreneurs, like being really busy and doing the activities that ultimately move the needle are the things that matter, which obviously is somewhat true. Like that needs to get done or else nothing's going to happen. But at the same time, we feel like, and I totally relate to what the author was saying, if we take that time, like you were just saying, to like work on the business, look at the KPIs, forecast out a marketing campaign to like figure out what you think is going to happen, or like design systems so when someone works in your business, they know how to do it. We feel like that's like a waste of time because usually that requires more thinking than doing. And I remember reading that in that book and I said, oh my gosh, that's so true. I feel like there's been times where I needed to like systematize something. And I felt like that was a waste of time because I should go be making offers. And once I read that, I was like, oh, I'm going to start spending time now to like actually design this business so it can start to run somewhat on its own. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. There's pure gold in that whole statement, because, I still feel that to this day. Sometimes I'm like, I just feel like I'm just constantly planning. Like I don't feel like I'm getting any real work done.
Yeah.
But it's the knowledge of knowing that you're not doing wasted work and wasted efforts and things like that. It's the whole story of somebody saying, out there in the woods chopping down trees, getting lumber or something like that. And then the manager climbs up a tree and looks out and says, oh crap, we're in the wrong forest, right? It's just like you spent all that time and effort doing the wrong thing. And had you just taken some time to look at what you were doing and where you were going, it would be spent in the right direction. And, it doesn't feel like you're doing as much work, but you're doing more work because it's leveraged work, right? It's more planned out work. And I like your statement about the phones, because that's one of the biggest differences, I think, with our getting, more houses under contract, was when our dedicated acquisitions person had time to have buffers between appointments, to be able to go and just like reset and not carry anything that happened from previous appointments where maybe a seller laughed at them, or got real angry with them about offering a low amount, and carrying that into the next one, and then like offering too much because they're like, oh,
they want to like justify to their ego that they're worthy or something. Yeah. I've been on thousands of appointments. I've found that same thing where like, if someone goes into an appointment with the seller, and we do a lot of stuff on the phone now, if your head's not in that, oh, forget about it. You could have the best deal ever, but that's it. Like I was telling Brett, I'm like, listen, man, number one thing is you got to reset yourself every time you're going to have a conversation with somebody, because at the end of the day, they don't care if you're in a bad mood. All they care about is, can they get their problem solved? And I always say to him, this is like, I guess more of a sales tip, but I'm like, whether you buy that house or not, you have an opportunity to get them to like you at the end of that phone call and have goodwill be built, whether you're buying their house or not. And we have so many sellers that obviously don't take our offer, but they'll literally refer their friends to us when we didn't even buy their house, because they like the way that we treated them and they felt like it was a transparent process. And like that alone, like when I was teaching him that, I'm like, you can't lose at the end of the day, because if you're upfront with them and you're consistent with them, you're either going to buy their house and solve their problem, or you're going to be a helpful, trustful advisor. They're going to think highly of you, and then they're going to refer their friends, or they're just going to have, you're going to have that goodwill be built, and you just can't lose. And I've made so many mistakes with sellers. I could probably write a book like you about it, maybe I will.
I think you end up enjoying the business more too, because you know that you're helping people. It's not just what can I get out of you real quick, and if I can't, then I'm moving on. It's
Yes.
really,
So true.
yeah, serving a little bit at least. And, but yeah, so that's like doing that kind of thing. And I think even, along the whole sales thing, something that came to mind too, was part of our process became, have time to come to the appointment a little bit early, sit out in your car and actually, reset from whatever happened before, and then visualize getting a contract, sort of the law of attraction kind of stuff. And
Yeah,
we
man.
had salespeople that did that and they did much better than the ones that didn't,
That's so
because they
true.
go into it as if it had already happened. And it's just like, it's cool stuff. But of course somebody's got to believe in that, right? Because otherwise it's like
It works
20
though.
million.
It's so true. Like, especially too, if you take what you just said and you combine that with like the going at them with like the helpful approach, like you can't lose at the end of the day. And you're gonna,
Yeah.
like, salespeople, I've noticed too, like they're the good ones at least are like high energy. They're like, all or nothing people. They're usually not that organized. So like if their head isn't in it, I mean, you're just sometimes my cost per lead in San Diego is $500 a lead sometimes. And like if they're gonna go on an appointment, it's $500 and they're gonna have their head up their ass. I'm not gonna be a happy customer, So that's that. The mindset is like people don't like see with sales training. Like I have like John Martinez. I've been through his trainings and I've noticed that like the mindset piece that he covers is so important. And most people will like get a sales training, whether that's his or Sandler or whatever, and they'll skip the mindset part. And then they'll just say, how do I like get this seller to sell me their house half off? And it's like, dude, you got to start with your mindset. Because if you don't have that figured out, all these strategies they're going to go in one ear and out the other ear. And you're going to be like, well, this didn't work.
Yeah, it's the
So
thinking of it's just step 1, 2, 3. If I do these 3 things,
yeah,
just
of
sign over
course.
the house to me, right?
Yeah, they're going to roll over and send me the contract. I'm like, that doesn't work, man. Like you gotta, anyway, that could be a whole nother podcast. But anyway, so this has been awesome so far. So I want to definitely take some time. And I know recently, as we're recording this, what is it, October now? Time flies. Yeah.
Yeah.
October 6th, 2021. And you have a new business you just started. You're starting businesses left and right. What's Forefront CRM? I know what it is, but to the listeners, what is it? And then how is this CRM unique amongst the other ones? Because I've seen it actually on the back end. It's an awesome tool, and I think it really adds a lot of value in the marketplace. And I know you've been really working hard at this thing, and it's getting some great traction.
Yeah. So, basically, what Forefront does is helps real estate investors organize their business visually so that no leads slip through the cracks. And the key thing there is visually, and that's really what separates us as well from all the other systems that are out there. And that's why, I talked to a customer yesterday that just came to us. He walked away from a $5,000 licensing fee he paid for a different system out there.
Mm-hmm.
You probably know which one I'm talking about, but he left that because he paid that and didn't like it and felt like there were too many clicks. He's like had to get around to get all the information, which is the same argument you hear about Podio.
Yeah.
And he came over to us and he's like, I just got to tell you, you guys built something amazing. This is really cool. And the way it works is truly simple, because everybody says that their system's simple, but what does that really mean?
It's not. Yeah.
It's not. Like if you have a feature list that's a mile long, it's never going to be simple. Right.
No.
Because all you did was try to put as many features to sell people into the system. We took a different approach, because in the past we had built something like that and it did stink because of it. And so I decided, let's scrap it. Let's start over and focus on being simple and being something that really helps people and that they like actually using. And so the way we do it is basically anything that you need in that system is no more than like 1 or 2 clicks away. Like you're never drilling down in somewhere and getting lost and having to find your way back or go like 5 different places to find something you need. We really revamp and really rework the interface to make it better and better, like all the time. And then we talk with the customers every 2 weeks to get input and feedback to do that. So it's like everybody, like I truly believe that we're going to be number 1 for CRM for real estate investors in the future. And this is how we're doing it. And the people that have come over to us have voiced that, and some of them will even tell us like, we'd love to have this feature, but if it's going to complicate the system, don't do it. I'd rather
Forget about it. Yeah.
the
simplicity.
Yeah.
That's so true, man. And here's something you mentioned, no lead left behind. This is something that it's very hard for new investors to kind of realize, because they might not have a lot of leads. But like, I have thousands and thousands of leads in my system that have cost me hundreds of dollars each lead. Right?
Yeah.
I've been doing this for 5 years. And the amount of deals that we get, like, I'll give you, we got a house in San Diego. We made like 55 G's on the house, and it was sitting in the CRM from a year ago. And it was up for grabs from anyone. It's $55,000. That's a big deal for anyone. Doesn't matter what market you're in. And that was sitting in the CRM. And the reason we bought the house is because no lead gets left behind. So if number one, if investors don't have a CRM, if they're listening to this and they don't want to spend, the minimal cost ultimately it's going to be to have a CRM, and compared to what it actually brings in value, they're leaving so much money on the table. And even if they're just getting started, I advise like new investors, if they reach out to me, get a CRM from day one, because that thing is going to build week over week over week over week. And if you don't have a place to keep all your data, you're going to lose these deals that are in there, because most leads, like we talked about earlier, they're going to come in, they're going to opt in, they're going to be in your CRM. And then it's going to take 7, 8, 9, sometimes 10 contacts to get them to eventually sign. Mm-hmm. And if you're just looking for these low hanging fruit people, you're going to be you're ultimately in the wrong business. So the importance of having a database or CRM, whatever you want to call it, and being able, like you said, to visually see that. So, exactly, like, this is the thing with any CRM, it's like, you want to see what is the prospect, and then what is our next step with this prospect? Are they going to have an offer presented? Is there an appointment that had to get made? Is there a follow-up? Is it a dead lead? Whatever. Yep. And I just being able to have that systematically, especially when you hire a team, I mean, it's so important. And even if you're new, you got to get in the habit of getting a CRM, and especially one like Forefront, where it's very visual. I've seen the back end myself. So Danny, when it comes to the CRM, like what is this like, how does it kind of work from, obviously we're doing this audio podcast, but like, it's very simple. So like, what are like the critical things that every investor should have in a CRM, and like, how does that, how does Forefront kind of fit in the mix there? Because I've seen it. It's really, really easy to understand.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing where people kind of get hung up, because they're like, well, what is this supposed to do for me? Like, I've already got a way that I do things. And so if I get a system like this, it's kind of disrupt how I'm doing things. Yeah. Right. But that's what most of us need, that disruption, right? So that we move into like another year of new experience. Right. But basically the steps to really get use out of any CRM, and with even Forefront, is you hook up what you have to it. Right. So, I mean, if you've got a website, right, you want any new lead to come in and hook up to it and have those leads be there. And if you're doing direct to mail, you probably have the phone number. Hopefully you're doing different marketing numbers, so results from these campaigns, and you have those phone numbers hooked up to the system. And we integrate with CallRail, which allows you to have those numbers and different things like that. And so any call or new text that comes in from a contact that's not in your database already, it's going to create a new record. So no matter what, like any new lead comes in, this is like the central hub for where all your leads are, right? Your new ones. So even if a call came in and you have somebody on your team taking those calls, but they miss it, you're not relying on them to remember to call that back and get that lead or information or put it in the system. It's going to be in the system, right? It won't ever slip through that way, which could be happening if things are going to people's cell phones and you don't know if they call them back or not, anything, right? So you have to have that central hub where all these come in, you knew that it came in, that somebody addressed it, somebody took care of it or didn't, right? So that you can continue to work it. Now, the next step is working it through your workflow. What do you typically do, right? You've got to make contact usually, if it's like a web lead, especially. You didn't talk to them yet, so you got to make contact, right? So the system can clearly show you one of the columns here is contacting. We know that we still need to make contact with these guys. And then like appointment set, negotiating, you can just visually see where everything is in your pipeline. And it's just really cool. It's a lot of fun to drag and drop those and move them along as well. But there's automations in there so that you can make sure that the tasks that need to be done right before an appointment, you probably have a list of things. Hopefully you have a checklist, right, of things that need to be done before the appointment. And so you can have the system create these and then make sure that they're always done. And what's awesome about that is if you're doing it yourself, you have it created and you hire somebody, they just plug right into the system and they have those tasks assigned to them. And you don't have to remember to coach them. You just say, hey, if it's in here, open it up. You have new tasks already because it got to this stage, right? It automatically knows when to put tasks on. And then the big part at the end is the follow-up, like you talked about. Now, I cringe when I think back about that book and about the fact that 495 leads and only like 11 or 13 deals. That's like 1 out of every 45 leads became a deal.
Yeah.
And you know the biggest reason why that happened?
No follow-up?
I didn't follow up. I maybe did like once or twice, right? I'll make an offer or something, and then I call the next day. So
Hey, you want it?
you're gonna take that offer?
Take that.
And then,
Been there.
and then I'm like, I'm working new leads and stuff, and so it gets lost. And so having, like you said, most people will not sell the day of your offer or the next day. Most of it comes later down the line. And so that's the beautiful thing about the system having a CRM. And in ours, the pipeline shows you active stuff that you're working. Anything that goes into automated follow-up, like an offer, you might manually follow up once or twice, but then you can put in an automated follow-up to send text, emails, and even send you a task or something a week later to manually call them or something. Once you put in automated follow-up, it comes off of that pipeline and goes into automation so that you're still just dealing with what you need to focus on, the hot stuff. And then if that seller through that automated follow-up or your manual follow-up, starts to get motivated enough, because that's what it is over time, right? It's not that you followed up with them 20 times and that's the magic number. It's that you're sending message to them over a long period of time so that when motivation does hit the point where they're like, okay, you know what? It is, I'm just ready to be done. I'm ready to sell this. The only person, like most of us don't follow up consistently.
So true.
Right. And like even big investors, they will tell you that they do not. And it's just crazy. And I really believe that if you're doing this and you're like most of your, like probably 90% plus of your competition is not, maybe even more. And so if you're the only person contacting this person and it takes them 9 months or a year to finally have a situation happen in their life where they do become motivated enough to accept your offer, and you are the only person still talking to them,
You have no competition.
To call. They're going to be like, well, this guy is like on top of it. He keeps, and these messages, because if you're thinking, well, I don't want to do that because that just seems pushy, like I'm pushing them to sell to me. And it's not at all. Those messages should always be things like, hey, just thinking about that house. I wonder if you ever did anything with it. Or I'm still interested and I really want to buy that house. I just want to let you know, and then always a question, right? Because you want them to respond.
Oh, 100%.
But that's all it is. It's just like you would normally. If you were going to call them, you wouldn't want to say something that would make somebody cringy, right?
Yeah.
You're just going to say
suspect.
something. What's that?
Say something that's suspect.
Yeah, something sus. Yeah, you don't want to be sus. You don't want to be.
Yeah.
But that's a beautiful thing when you get something like that going, and knowing that you've got a system that's automatically doing that. And even if it gets to the point where it's just like one text or tasking you to call them once a month, it's going to happen. And just like the number of deals that you're going to get, that conversion rate, like we talked about, is going to improve.
And your cost will go down. Your cost per deal and all your marketing will get way better, and your cost per deal will go down, because if your leads to deals go down, it gets better over time. You know what I mean? That's why the follow-up is so important. Yeah,
that lever, because what that does is increases your conversion rate. And that conversion rate, that number, that one number is like one of those, I think I heard it said the other day in a book, is small hinges move big doors.
I love that quote. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what it is. That conversion rate is a small hinge. It's going to move a big door, because if you just increase that by a little bit, like what comes out of that is huge. Like even just adding one deal, right? How much does that make you? And how much is that going to improve everything for you? Because then you have more money to do marketing, you have more money to do a bunch of stuff. But we went from when I wrote that book and the way I was doing everything horribly back then, 1 out of every 45 or so leads becoming a deal. We got to where we were doing about 1 out of every 5 to 1 out of every 7 is what we were averaging.
That's amazing. That's unbelievable. Yeah.
Because it was the measuring and managing, right? Like looking at numbers and figuring out where's the spot that's got to be tweaked a little bit? Where's the hinge that's maybe stuck in all of this? And anyway, that's what, awesome. that's what the system helps people do too, with the KPIs built in and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. It's funny you say the follow-up thing. I actually had a lady. I don't really speak to that many sellers anymore since I hired Brett, but there's this one lead I've been trying to find in San Diego, because a lot like these San Diego houses, it's just the cost per deal is high, but our margins are big. I followed up with this one lady literally 10 times. I texted her 10 times, and it wasn't like crazy, like, voodoo language. I'm like, hey, just want to let you know, if you're ever interested in selling, I'd be more than happy to make an offer. No pressure. I sent her 10 text messages. The lady text me back yesterday, like a whole paragraph. And we're like friends talking back and forth. And like, if I didn't send her that 10th text, maybe she would let's say that turns into like an 80K deal, because that's pretty common in San Diego. Like, what's the ROI there? 10 text messages. Like, so people, that's where, like, that's a resistance thing. Like, human beings don't like resistance, because human nature, you don't like that. But if you know that most people won't do that, like follow up and using a good system like Forefront, if you just commit to doing that alone, your competition is truly irrelevant, because most people they're either too busy, or they're too smart to follow up, or their marketing is too good because they're sending some magic mail piece that no one's ever sent, or some garbage like that. So, I mean,
it makes you a super investor. I mean, it really does. It's like, we ought to have capes, right? Like,
yeah, right, with the S on it.
But it's funny, because even though we have a system that does that, we had a call, I was talking about how we have those calls with customers. And this was a little while back, but we had a call where I wanted to ask everybody, I was like, okay, everybody on this call, like, who's using the automated follow-up and who's not? And literally half of the people on the call were not using it. So it was beautiful, because we got to, well, first of all, the half that was getting on to the half that wasn't during the call. Like, what the hell are you guys doing?
What are you doing? Yeah.
Because we're getting all these deals. Like, we're doing these deals, and you guys why are you not doing it? So we got to hear why they still weren't doing it, even though they had the capability. And that gets into this whole thing where they were like, well, we're just afraid that it's like salesy or pushy to do it. And it's like, okay, well, you got a mindset shift needed here, because you're making assumptions, and you just, like, a perspective shift needs to happen here. And you get that perspective from the people doing it, telling you they're not getting angry calls. Like, they're getting more deals.
Yeah. And they're serving more people, they're helping their families. That, like, people, I think that's the thing with people. Like, it's hard to teach that. It's like, if you're not following up with people, ultimately you're not getting someone who's going to eventually need their problem solved by your company. So it's either going to be a competitor, or you're not serving them. And that's ultimately going to make you less successful, because now your business isn't getting the revenue that it needs. So it's like this whole mindset thing. I agree with you, man. People, if they have a follow-up problem and it's a mental thing, they should get some mindset coaching before they.
When if you have a team, one other thing that came from that was, if you have a team and you're okay with doing it, but you task like your acquisitions person or somebody with making those messages, and they're the ones that are hesitant and say, no, I don't want to do that. What one of the customers said, that she ran into that. She said, my acquisitions woman didn't want to do that because she was worried about it. And so what she did was she said, well, you come up with the messages then. If you don't want to use these that we came up with, like, you come up with your own, and that way it's in your voice too, and it just makes sense. And then she was all for it at that point, because she could craft it the way she wanted to. But anyway.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Well, Danny, this has been a lot of fun. I want to keep this around 45 minutes as usual. Yeah. So I really appreciate you coming on the show today. Now, if people want to get in touch with you, right? If they want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to reach you directly? And then after that, if they want to check out Forefront, what is the best website that we'll put here in the show notes that they can just go and click on that and check out the CRM themselves?
Yeah, for sure. If you want to reach out to me, probably the best thing to do is, I'll just give my email address, danny@forefrontcrm.com. Okay. So DANNY, and then FOREFRONTCRM.com. And then that's the website as well. So if you want to get some information about it, we do have a demo on there, and you can also book a demo. So if you want to be shown parts of the system, or have something really directed to what you're looking to do, and then having us show you how we can have that solved by the system, if it does, right? You can do that as well. So if you want that, you can go over to forefrontcrm.com/demo, and you can get that all set up.
We'll have that in the show notes, man. I appreciate you coming on the show. This was a lot of fun, and I'm sure we'll talk soon.
Yeah, thanks, Greg.